everybody. Thank you so much for coming and being flexible with our location and flexible with snow days on the pacing of lessons set for tomorrow and everything. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow and getting to see Shannon work with Sarah's kids. So our process for today is going to be that we'll hear a little bit about the work that's gone into getting kids ready for tomorrow. We'll hear about the lesson that's actually going to unfold tomorrow, and we'll talk through the protocols for what we can expect when we are in the classroom and afterward. So I'm going to pass it to Tara first to talk about what her students have been doing getting ready with the Giver.
So we started the Giver, well, with snow days. It's been over 3 weeks ago now. And I have a class of 7th graders. There's 11 students. 10 of these students are on IEP, and 1 is an at-risk. Kind of, this is sort of her intervention right at this point in time. So they all have reading goals except for her, although I anticipate her getting one fairly soon. So this is a novel unit that I usually do in March, and the kids were kind of getting bored with guided reading and our norms, so we kind of bumped it up this year a little bit. This group saw the 8th graders. I also teach this with my 8th grade class, a little bit more in depth, but and the kids were asking so many questions, and they were asking the kids questions, and I thought, okay, we're just going to roll with this. So kind of changed it a little bit, and I thought this group of kids was ready for this. I start off teaching the Giver by just having kind of a debate and a discussion. And some of those prompts or questions I ask them is it okay to lie sometimes? And they go to the sides of the room. They go to a yes or a no side, and then they just like talk to each other. And they try to get people to come onto their side. And this is quite an activity for this big of a group, especially because there's kids moving, and then they want a middle. They want to, oh, I don't know. I'm like, no, sometimes. There's no sometimes, right? It's yes or no. Memories play an important part of your life, and who you are and who you become. And that becomes a very deep discussion. Kids start talking about emotions, and I have a student that was adopted from China, and she brought a lot of information into play. She brought her adoption book, and it was very powerful. She's very excited to see you tomorrow. It is better to never experience cold or hunger or struggle. The past repeats itself. People in society accept things they usually would not if they were on their own. So we had the discussion of being on your own versus being part of a group or a family. They brought in different classrooms with that one, which was a new discussion. You know, is how they associated school with this as well. Classes they feel like they're alone, and classes where they feel like, hey, we can work together, we can ask anyone. So that was a huge discussion for us. This took a little bit longer than typical with this group, but it was a great discussion. It's better to be part of a group than to be alone. It's better to remain ignorant about some aspects of life, which then we had to go into ignorance and what that means and what that looks like. And the last one was, it's better to be in a safe environment and never feel fear. And that brought up some interesting topics as well for one particular student who has been removed from his mom's home and now placed with his dad. So he brought up some memories and some thoughts about that process, and the kids, just the discussion and the emotion and the memory that all of that brought into play, I think has helped them be more engaged in this book. So that activity is how we start. Then we just start reading, and we have a lot of low decoding kids, so we listen to this. So it's on the iPad, and they're following along. And I'm always observing, and the kids, oftentimes they're on the edge of their seats when we're listening, and they're really engaged in this book. And I think you recommended this book to me a few years ago.
I'll take credit for that.
Yeah, you did. And I hadn't read it, so the first time I taught it, I hadn't even read it. So I'm not really proud to say that. But sometimes the kids really like that when I say, I haven't read it either. So they really love this book. We have not, our goal was to have it finished by the time this learning lab started, and we are not. We are close, but we're not there yet. But with the clues and what Sharon has done, we don't need to be there yet.
Well, that's so hard not to talk about the ending. Have you guys all read the book?
So yeah, don't spoil it. No
Have you
spoilers.
read the second book? Sun
Oh.
continues the story.
The
So
sun.
if you want to know what happens to those two as they're leaving, read Sun.
Yeah.
S-O-N. It's amazing. Amazing.
So a couple of other activities we do, they really love the fact when they realize that their world, their society is in black and white and no color. That just sparks so much conversation and what would that be like. So we took a picture in class of us in our classroom and then we put it in black and white and they wrote and journaled about it. And what does it look like? What does it feel like? And they all, it's very negative for them. Like the connotation of black and white is very negative. And I tried to do a flip side of that and they could not go there. So then they write a color poem, which you'll see up on the whiteboard. Some of them will just be turning them in tomorrow because we've had a lot of snow days and absences. So that's totally on their own, no class time. I give a quick direction and some examples and a couple of patterns, and it's pretty much free to do what they want to do with that. So we don't take a lot of class time for that, but they don't often get to have time to be the creative producers that they like to be. So that's really fun as well. A lot of discussion, they're talking about it outside of class as well. I do make sure they know if they've seen the movie, not to talk about it because the movie and the book are so different. And we will eventually watch the movie and we'll do a compare and contrast book and movie, which is huge as well. So that's
Great.
kind of our class.
Awesome, thank you. Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about the magical breakout box and how they work? And
Right, so we collaborated because we wanted a celebration at the end of the Giver and to also get these kids working as a group. It does pull on their knowledge of the Giver to some degree, but it's really about group work more than anything else. I find that with these, the content, you do have to draw on your content knowledge, but sometimes it's not quite to the degree that you might want with a different lesson if you're focusing on this learning. So the breakout boxes are something that I bought through an organization called Breakout EDU. And they come, so it's this, and before you write anything down, there's kind of a change in how they're doing things. So I will share all that with you guys when we do our debrief. But you order the breakout kit and then you get the locks with it. And it also comes with a UV pen and a flashlight to read UV light. And there's also a key lock. So I have 4 locks here that I'm using with this breakout. So what I found was a free game about the Giver that I got through another person who's been, people create them and they share them through Breakout EDU. So this was a user-generated game, and then what I do is I find them and I tweak them. And we actually did a trial run with her 8th grade students and found some things we wanted to tweak with it, because it's really hard when you first do it to know how hard it's going to be. No, and because I don't know her students, and she hasn't done clues like this with her students, it's not like this is a focus of your learning. So it's really hard to know how fast they're going to be able to figure this out. So we did kind of a pilot run, and we got a sense of how this would go. And then we changed some. So when I first got the clues, I tweaked them based on what I thought would be fun for kids. So there were some clues that just didn't seem very fun. And so I kind of, messed with it a little bit. There was a lock key that involved finding a lock in the room. Well, if you have 2 or 3 groups that are competing and they have to find a lock in the room, then once one group finds it, the other groups find it. It's a little trickier to set up, so I just removed the lock key. I thought if we had 4 clues instead of 5 or 6 clues, that they would work together more. So it's like just based on my prior knowledge of how these work, I tweak it. And then we got together and we tweaked it based on what her kids, she thought her kids would understand. Then we tweaked it again based on, that pilot that we did. So that was the process of setting this up. So I have 4 clues that you guys can look at, and I don't know if you need to really know these in much detail, but there's 4 clues, and the 4 clues go with the 4 different locks. So there's a 4-digit lock, which would be 4 numbers. There's 1 clue that gives you 3 numbers. There's 1 clue that gives you a word, and that's the word lock. And then there's a clue that gives you directions, and they actually have to use a map in the room, and it's a map of the whole community, actually, more than that, the other communities as well.
Yeah, all 4 books.
Yeah, so that's the Directional Lock, which they think is really fun. And then I set these up so that we can put the kids in groups. There's lots of ways you can do it. You can set it up so that you only have 1 box, and kids are bringing you clues, or bringing you, their guesses, and then you let them try it, and you write down how many times the groups have tried. So you can make it work, with just 1 box. I like to spread it out because there's something about having a box in front of you with a bunch of locks. It's just really fun. So and kids, they've been sitting out at the high school, and they can't stop talking about them. They just want to, one of the seniors is like, can we set this up for our senior class? We can do it before school. Sure.
Yeah.
So the other thing I was going to say is at the beginning of class tomorrow, you'll see me introduce what a breakout kit is and some of the guidelines for how to use it, how they'll be working together and what will work best in order to solve the clues, how they have to work together. So I'll go through some of that, and that will answer some of your questions about the locks and how they work. But what we did is, this has a hasp that is this thing, and all the locks fit on this. And once they break into the box, you can put something in there or not. Usually I don't. I just don't like that. I don't like the idea of giving them candy all the time, everything's a parade. So I usually have a thing that says you broke out, and I take pictures of the group together. Sometimes you can make it competitive, or not sometimes, but you can make it competitive or not. You can time them. We did a Romeo and Juliet with 9th grade, and we timed it and kept track of each class. And then I did it with 11th grade, and it was on commas, and we didn't emphasize the competition at all. And they sort of brought it on themselves they'd look around and see where people were at, but it wasn't, it didn't become this intense environment. So it depends on what you want to do. And Tara had said to me, I don't want this to be a competition. She knows her kids. And
They were funny today when we were talking about it, because I told them that you were coming, and they said, so if they're working over there, we need to be quiet, and so they don't hear what we're talking about. So they're already, they're already thinking about that. And I did buy a kind of a quote on Etsy, a giver quote, I should have brought it down. You'll see it tomorrow. So each of them will have kind of a card in there, and I'm going to personalize it and write them each a little note. So there will be something in the box. It's not anything big, but they'll have a little giver kind of card quote.
And you gave your kids copies of the book that you bought for
My
the
8th
8th grade
graders,
group,
yeah.
which was sweet. They were really into that. So, but you have smaller classes. It's easier to do that. So yeah, I usually just have a sign and I take a picture, and they're fine with that. The focus is on getting it, not what's in the box. But the 11th graders when I did it were really nothing.
Well, and this group they did it with us a couple of years ago. At Christmas time we did it.
Oh,
and
really?
they knew there were candy canes. They were talking about, well, last time we did it, there was candy canes in there.
That's all they remember.
What's going to be in there this
That's
time?
the problem.
And one student said, well, I didn't get to do a lock. I did the clues and I never got to do the lock. So, they remember this from 5th grade.
So how many kids in your class have done it before?
I think 8 of the 11
Okay.
I've had for 3 years. So they did it in 5th grade.
Okay. So it's not new to them.
Mm-mm.
So, with that as the background for what we're going to see, when we're in the classroom tomorrow, our job is to be as unobtrusive as possible. We want to be the fly on the wall. We want to let the kids be in their natural environment as much as possible. And I think it's important for us to just be mindful of that when we're going in, because we want this to be a positive experience. We also want to be really respectful of Tara and Shannon's work in the classroom, so it's not our job to step in and help a kid jump forward in a clue or point something out. We get to be the observers. We get to just relax and take it in. We want to be positive through the whole thing, both with each other and with the kids, and we really want to save our observations from what's happening so that we can talk about them as a large group after school. So there will be things that jump out at you and you're like, oh, come look at this thing over here, they're about to do something. Take it in, observe it, bring it to the group at the end. And if you, after the observation, are heading back to another building with a colleague, also hold yourself as close to accountable as possible for not doing the processing away from the group, just so that we all come with fresh minds and fresh eyes. So, do you have questions about that part? Are you feeling pretty okay? Okay. We put together some look-fors, so if you want to flip ahead to the note-taking tool on page 3, the overarching goal for the day that we talked about was how do breakout kits encourage student engagement, help develop group work skills, and put knowledge gained in class to use. So we want to, that's the overarching focus question. And then the little look-fors are, in group conversations, what are students saying to each other? How are they using their knowledge of the giver? What's the dialogue happening that reflects their curricular knowledge? We want to look for the diversity of ways for students to shine. There's more than one way for kids to show their knowledge in this kind of activity. And so be looking for the kid who's quietly thinking back through versus the kid who's jumping right to, ooh, I think it might be the, and look for the different ways that kids are being successful. When students are engaged or disengaged, are you able to see any patterns for what are roadblocks for kids that cause them to disengage or get frustrated? And similarly, with group work, what are the stumbling blocks that cause groups to struggle? When you see because in half an hour of group work with middle schoolers, there are roadblocks and there are stumbling points. So what are the triggers for those? Yeah. Within 30 seconds or so.
No, it's a thing that we work really hard on, and it's hard. It's hard to know how to work on it and what they need.
And this group in particular, it's a challenge. So.
And then, while we're there, look specifically at the logistics of the breakout. What prep work had to happen beforehand? I mean, we've heard some of the prep work, but really be mindful of how that impacts the flow of the lesson. What is included in the introduction of the breakout box to students? It'll help us knowing that 8 of the 11 have done these before, because that'll probably affect how much rollout of this is the number lock and this is how it works. And then what do these two do as the students are working? Both Tara as the classroom teacher who's been working on the curricular content with students, and Shannon as the collaborative teacher coming in with the new activity for the students. And the students are all comfortable with you as a teacher because they've worked with you for 4 years, or 3 years, but.
I also have a para, so Mrs. Leaps, Deanne Leaps is in my room, and so they will also go to her too.
Yep. Great.
Right.
And then watch for the balance of curricular information versus group work strategies, and be thinking ahead to what in your classroom could this transfer to? Where could you put something like this to use? So those are the look-fors. It's a long list, but it seems like they sort of group themselves. It's an innovative approach, so we had more things to dialogue about. Do you have anything else you want to add, or should we just talk through the details of where to be and when tomorrow? So we'll be meeting in Tara's room tomorrow. Tara's room is on the 3rd floor. And it's going to be, class starts at 2:21. They have about a 3-minute passing period between class periods. And so if we can aim to be arriving in that 2:18-ish window.
And my room is empty. I co-teach somewhere else the period before, so if you get here early and I'm not there, just go on in.
Perfect.
It's empty.
Is there a specific spot where it would be helpful for our stuff to be so it's out of the students' way?
So they will be working on, the breakout boxes will be at the 3 tables. So the 2 kidney tables, and then there's a coffee table in the middle of the room will be the 3rd group. And so I think they'll start at the rug by the coffee table. So even along the whiteboard on the, I don't know direction here in this building, there's a couch and some chairs, a love seat and some chairs. Stuff can go there. They won't be there. So.
What's your room number?
321.
Excellent. If there aren't other questions, we are going to end on time, even though we got started a little bit late, because it's important. I mean, you all are being super generous with your time to clear 2 afternoons in a row. And we're grateful for that, to go on this adventure together. So if there aren't other questions, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy.
There's candy canes in it.
Okay, so most of you know, some of you don't. This is what the breakout looks like. It is a box. Ava, if you see, okay? It is a box with locks, okay? Your job is to break into this box, okay? In the amount of time we have left in the school day, without physical force, without taking it, like throwing it to the ground, okay? So, you will be given 4 clues, and those 4 clues will unlock, once you figure them out, will give you the codes to unlock these 4 different locks. Okay, so I'm going to go through a little bit about what you need to know before you start. So you know what a breakout is. This breakout focuses on the giver because you're reading the giver, right? I will try really hard not to give away the ending. I'll try really hard.
I know that.
It's hard, okay? I will tell you guys that you should read the next book that continues the story. Okay, so see me in the library if you want to keep going. All right, so 5 tips. Nope. How many do I have?
3.
3. Yeah, that was just a test to see if you guys were going to read closely. All right, so we've got 3 tips. 1, read each clue carefully. Okay, so that's your first tip, because if you just dive in and start right away, it can be confusing. So that's your first tip for today. Your second tip is remember to communicate with those people in your group. Okay, so talk to them and work together. That's what collaborate means. Okay. I saw one group yesterday and somebody had the answer and he said it so quiet that his partner didn't hear. Okay, so remember, you're in this together. Okay, use your hint cards wisely. You get 2 hint cards. Every group, there are 3 groups, will get 2 hint cards. Okay, those hint cards you can redeem like a coupon. You can hand it to me, you can hand it to Miss Leaps, you're good with that, and Miss Henry, and you can say we need a hint. But here's the deal. Your whole group has to decide that that's okay. So it can't be like Lincoln is having a hard time with this clue. He's like, hint card over here. He's going to talk to his group and decide, should we use the hint card? Do you want to use it right away? You'll have to think about it. Okay, so there's 4 clues and there's 2 hint cards. We're not going to say anything unless you give us a hint card. You're going to try to get something out of this, I know, but we're going to be quiet. It's going to be hard for us. So the hint cards are inside of the packets. Okay, so inside of everybody's envelope, 2 hint cards. They look sort of like the ones on the TV screen here. So a few more things you need to know. You can use a copy of The Giver. That's fine. You guys know where they are, so you can grab one. There are 4 clues and 4 locks, which I already mentioned. And I will just explain quickly that there are 2 number locks. So there's one that has 4 numbers, and you have to make sure you line it up right. Okay, so I remember you being kind of a lock master. So remember that you've got to line it along the right place in order to get it to open. Same with this one, it's got to be showing in the, and I know it's hard to see, but just ask us if you have questions about that. And then there's a word lock, so you have to spell a word. It can be 4 letters or 5 letters. Okay, so if it's only 4 letters, you'll have a blank space. Okay, and there's a blank space in there that you can use. And then, remember the directional lock?
Yeah.
Okay, so the directional lock is cool. It could be one direction, or it could be 10 different directions, or 11, or 12. Every time you guys try it, and it doesn't work, squeeze it twice to clear it. So it's like you hold the whole lock, and you go squeeze, squeeze, and then try it again. Okay? So that's how that one works. So directional locks can be a little bit tricky. And I would say when you do this, you want to go, up, pause, right, pause. So, And it can't be too fast or too slow. So kind of try it a couple times before you say, that doesn't work. So the fourth one here is don't play with the locks until you have a guess. So don't try to just crack the code, okay? When you have a guess, then go to the lock and try it. But I don't want to see anyone just like playing with the locks constantly like this, but they're not playing with the clue, or they're not figuring out the clues, okay? So when you have a guess, give it a try. If it doesn't work, go back to your clue. Because, and I've told the other groups this too, that these can break, and then I have to use my own money, and I have to buy new ones. So just, use them only when you have a guess. The word lock I already talked about, that can be 4 or 5-letter word, so it's one of those. All right, your mission is to break into the box before our time is up. Okay, you know your groups, right? So I'm going to have you right now go to your groups, but you're not going to go into your clue envelope until I say go. What's that?
We're over here. Here, I'm gonna grab a ball.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Oh, so this is okay. So there's
Yep.
oh.
So remember hands on the locks until you're ready to guess.
Okay.
Yeah, honey, okay, so let's get settled. Have a seat and then give me your attention up here. So first of all, your envelope, you have to unwind the string in order to get into it. I'll say go and then you can open it, so hold on. Okay. One more thing before you guys go. I want you to think about how you're working together as a group. Because we'll reflect, actually Ms. Henry will reflect with you guys tomorrow on group work. Because I'm sure there's things you're going to do really well at and things that you will struggle at. So just kind of pay a little bit of attention to that if you can. Okay? And I know you really will be paying attention to this, but if you can stay aware of how you're working together, that would be great. I'm going to lock this back up for you guys. All right. On your marks. Get set. Go.
Start at the building. Starting at the building, I took my first breath to the place my mother made a living, to where I rest my head at night. Have all led me to this spot.
Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4. C. First letter of each one.
This is a okay, hold on, let me see. This one? Yes. Yeah, where in the book did Jonas see the red? It's in that. No, it's like kind of at the beginning. Where see color.
So let me try this one.
Two of the
They
games.
just have one of their names.
I mean, I
No,
don't think
because
it's.
it said, where in the book did Jonas see the red?
Yeah, we just have to remember which book it is, which chapter it is. I mean, it can't be
I know-
earlier in
I
the
know
book.
it can't be like way back
He was in the annex.
What?
In the annex. He was thinking of and the apple.
Hold on.
Oh, wait. Maybe? I just need to know how to spell it.
What are you trying to spell?
Wait,
Wait, that would also. Which
Bowser breaks a rule and brings home it's a pig. That was a 10 numbers.
we can write First, look at this, but to something this. Two. So this one two this. What?
Yeah, different color.
You can write on those, she said.
Here, let me try this. I think here. I want you to try this backwards.
What do you think this one is? Oh, that I found the end.
Annex room is like.
So that was. So this and this.
So there's a top and the bottom.
This.
To the side.
This.
Here, can I try it?
I found that. It's on the ground. Yeah, it's
Okay, so that is east. Because this one said child center. Nurturing center. Child center. Where in the book? Yeah, child center.
Where's my mother?
Wait, no.
Oh, wait, hold on.
This part that the
What
Try a different one.
7-1.
Try a different one while they're trying to figure out. Okay, where in the book did Jonas think she had?
Oh, I feel like I know this. Wait, here, let me try this one as.
So,
No.
this is.
Well, we are.
It could be anything.
See, because if you read it more closer, it makes a little
Is
sense.
this
Like,
not the nurturing center?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is talking about what
This is,
what
that's
Jonas.
The nurturing center is at east, so it's east, and then Jonas House and the nurturing
Wait,
center
no,
is south.
This one,
So
they're
north.
not, they're not
Wait.
talking about
We
the,
say east,
they're
south.
not talking
Oh,
about
no.
the nurturing center.
South.
No, because look, to where I rest my head. So
This is
this
his
is the
house.
third step. This is the third
This
step.
is his house
You need to
right
find a
here.
place where.
His mother made him.
So it might be east, west, north, south.
Try that.
No, east, west, south.
Squeeze it
north.
2 times.
No.
Okay, squeeze it to us. Okay, so when you,
Wait, would it be? Wait, because
It's
this one is.
this is at
Starting up the building.
This
I
is-
took my
no,
house
this is at
to the
north.
place my
No.
mother made a living.
but from Jonas's house.
I think
it's east.
The first part of it is probably the nurturing center.
So wait, no. I know where that.
Yeah.
So look, it's north.
See,
North.
the annex northwest.
When he takes his breath, he might be at the end.
Wait, is it? We know, is it?
I'll just try one.
We're to get your 152.
It has to start with one of them has to be one decision.
Did you read the?
Why is
This is just one clue though. You have 4 clues. This is only one.
Oh, I should have done that one day.
Wait.
So it's what's here?
Page one. Wait.
Here, so that would be.
Wait, look there. No, it's like no.
See, look, and this one,
No,
when
no,
flesh
no.
was so many
This is
different colors,
this is
that was before we went to blankness.
I have one.
west,
Today's flesh is all the same. That's
south,
what one of them is.
and
I
north.
say that. Okay, this one, number 4,
You can
is
write on these if we need to.
Okay,
I
so
know
what
it.
do you,
I know it.
or do you think you know it?
Oh, I see.
You see?
I see now.
we got
What do you see?
2 of them. I'm just trying to figure out this one because that was before we.
So it starts at the top and it goes down.
I think we have it.
Clear it first.
East.
Yeah, we can help with spelling. What do you need to spell?
Oh, I found it.
I need to find
Wait.
I need friends.
North.
There was a time actually you will see the question was many different.
Let's take this now.
What do you have?
You
Like this?
You spell it. Spell it the same way.
Wait, hold on.
So you guys have a little less than 15 minutes, and I think most groups have 2 hint cards left, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we're
So-
gonna do that.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah,
Do you have your hint cards? No?
You can.
What was
I
it?
think we should use
Can we use one or should we do a game?
You should use that.
So this one's done.
Not you.
Where in the world did Jonah see the red apple?
There's a page on it, but I don't know where it is.
That's on the page.
We figure out this one is used to explain how they found it on the board. Because they're outside and doing their activities. 2245. Oh wait.
What's where I rest my head at?
Well, we didn't really even use that hint.
No, you did.
I went to.
Done.
Do we still have John? We don't have 2 more.
Oh my god.
We found it.
I just need the word one. Jonas sees color.
The world wants to destroy this.
Oh,
The other one's for that one.
in the book.
Jonah sees
Color.
He started.
This one's done.
Yeah.
This one's done.
He started seeing red when.
This one's like 94.
We have one more.
One
So you
more.
got
We should just
Need to
wait for
use
like
it.
a little bit.
Yeah.
You need to use it
Because
wisely.
we already used it.
Okay, so when Jonah started seeing red, he was in the annex.
This one was the
Where were they?
I
Wait, the other one.
Never seen red, Jonah.
We need to figure out.
That
Yeah, it's that one.
Then he was thinking of an apple. Then he grabbed it. I think he was in the.
Alright. Yeah,
I just need to go out.
Come here.
So Jonas used color and alchemy did
Okay, point to it. No.
There's only one.
Don't move there. Start there. So you're starting there. Now what?
Yeah.
Vision.
He saw red.
Okay.
He saw red.
No. I did. You start there. Don't move there. Okay. So you. Okay.
What do they believe? What do they believe in this one? Jonas sees color.
One word. Made a big difference, didn't it, my dear?
Wait, no one did this one.
S.
So
See the red apple. The red in an apple.
We were talking about it in 90s.
Google. can be our friend.
Yeah, you had 7.
She's told about it again.
That's
Then she sees it again in the movie.
2. That's 2 times he's seen it.
2 times.
Yeah, maybe it could be.
The first time you see that.
You guys want to use a hand?
I mean, we do have one more.
Yeah, let's use one.
No.
Let's just try to
Okay.
Okay, so use it.
Well,
are
I mean, I'm fine with you.
Okay, no, it's not me.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So you need to use the book. And you have to.
It's very important.
And it's in the first 50 pages.
Yeah. No. What?
The
It's behind it. It's like it's kind of like the first 30.
The first 30.
Yeah. First 30. It's in between that point. If you go over 30, it's not there.
So that's in the first 30 pages.
And then,
Hey.
Hey. I should have said it so loud.
I'm in 30.
Wait,
no, you have to
wait, I think,
past
wait,
the
I think it's the chapter.
It's in the first 30.
Wait, guys, I think it's the number of the chapters that he sees the colors in.
That could be.
That could be it. To be the number of the chapters that he sees it in.
Oh, come on. So,
Yeah, you're
Lincoln just said it's within the first 30 pages.
So it can be in any page. The first
It's not coming up on Google though. Already is a little bit. What do you want instead of Safari? Safari has the same website as Chrome.
First 30.
Then it was in his hand. He looked at it carefully, but it was the same apple, unchanged.
So it's
Tell them where to go.
should give him a better hint.
That's exactly what it was. Doesn't come out. I want to say it so bad. No, I won't.
oh, I'm here.
Seriously?
Wait, what page numbers are you guys on?
22 and 23.
So it's, we can't.
What do those add up to?
22 and 23.
I honestly do not.
That's doing this. That's when he's at school.
Yeah,
But I can't remember what chapter that is.
Here, 23.
You don't need a blank number. It's 3 digits. You have the first
It's right here. It's right here.
What is it?
You have the first digit.
Oh wait,
This is not working like the website we had found earlier.
the first number is doing recreation. You see it at the school.
Well, it's
Hey,
recreation.
as your drone has casually picked an apple from the basket where the snacks were kept and had thrown it to his friend. Asher had thrown it back in. They had begun a simple game of catch. There had been nothing special about it. It was
Suddenly.
Wait, I think it's on this page.
So what page is this?
Did you find it? In the book?
Oh, it's 243.
What page is it on?
Or 324.
I know
It's not on page.
It's
Just wanted you guys to be able to get what's inside. What kind of shush was that?
Can you help casting it? What do you want it to be at?
I want to turn. I
There's
won't
2.
turn.
Now
It's stuck.
you can throw it on the ground.
What did you say?
You're trying to squeeze these together a little bit. There you go. Now do it.
Oh,
There you go.
3, 2, 4.
This one was actually
Square.
same with the other one.
Guys. It's for certain.
Oh, the note was.
you'll understand what it is.
Oh, let's put it aside for tomorrow. Thanks, Skylar. Where is that one?
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, sorry. Oh, well, don't look at that.
It's just saying we rock.
Those are just my
You
notes.
rock. You got in. And you.
And then all of these.
Look at
We rock!
Those are just my notes.
Those are from his.
Like, this one. I'm not gonna figure that one out.
Thank you, Tara and Shannon, for opening your classroom. That was really great to get to be in there. We've done it a couple different ways. One way that we've done it is go through the 4 rounds with a super strict, you two can't speak until we get done with round 3, and then it's your turn. And other times we've done it where we go through the rounds, and if there's something that bubbles up where you're like, actually, if I just say these 2 sentences, it's totally gonna head off like 15 more questions. I think with this size group, let's go with that model where it's just a little bit 1 notch less strict than the paper says we're gonna be. But reminders on the protocols, like in round 1, really truly stick to I saw or I heard. We wanna be as fact-based, as observational-based as we can be in round 1. And then in round 2, I noticed can be I noticed that kids were blah, 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 blah. It's a little more, what are you thinking the kids are learning? What are you, like, what was going on behind what you observed? Round 3 is gonna be when we ask the questions, and through all of them, I broke my own rule already, and I said you were awesome, and so I'm sorry, I will own that I was judgment-based, and we will avoid being judgment-based. So positive or negative, we just wanna state facts and things we saw, heard, noticed, wondered, as opposed to, I really liked how. So, we're going to acknowledge that it was a really fun lesson and we were overjoyed to be there, and now we'll get down to fact-based things. So, does anybody want to kick us off with round 1 on the I saw or I heard?
I'll start.
Go for it.
I saw students coming in just really relaxed to a really relaxed environment.
Let's just go around the table.
I saw when you, in part of your introduction, you gave them tips to help them be successful. I saw that those tips were presented both visually and verbally.
I don't know if this is more I saw or noticed, or I heard the initial divide and conquer, and then we're each going to take a clue, and then I saw as they went through started to do the more teamwork based stuff.
I saw that even though they were broken up into teams, it seemed like as a class that they were a team, with the start of the month and the way that the class started. I saw that even though each group was working together as a group, it seemed like one person in each group was kind of an unspoken leader. I heard the teacher remind students to think about how they work together because they will reflect on that.
I saw kids allowed to struggle and to work through a problem. So you make a judgment based on it.
We'll keep going around as long as you have things to say, and if at any point you feel like you've said what you want to say, you're welcome to pass.
I heard students challenging themselves instead of asking for a hint for more than, 20 some minutes.
I want to add one more thing that I forgot to say. You're all doing it, but we're going to try and leave student names out of it. So you're doing the I heard a student, I saw students, but that keeps it easier for the editing process later to not have to blank out student names. So.
I saw students being resourceful, so they were going back into their book, they were using the map. One student even, I heard him ask, can we use technology? And so he took a picture of the map so they could just go back to their group.
Which I'll just interject that we did that deliberately. We decided that they could use technology, but that we weren't going to explicitly say that. We were going to let them kind of puzzle through it.
I heard a group really concerned with making sure they all agreed. So which should we do first? Should we go get a book before any action was taken?
I saw really, the way I phrase it, the hints that were given, or the moments where like the kid needed an extra just little nudge, those were done in a really supportive manner and not just I'm giving you the answer, I'm going to tell you this thing. It was still allowed to work through the problem with a little bit of scaffolding.
I heard struggling readers not embarrassed, not afraid to read all the clues, and just very confident while they were reading. I heard a lot of positive, like self-talk, like, oh, I feel like I know this, or I think I got this, or there was just a lot of positivity.
I heard, or I saw a group strategize to look at all the clues first before beginning to work on any of them.
I saw some kids, like, the frustrated that I saw was never bad frustrated. It was purposeful and engaged frustrated.
After a good chunk of time, I heard teachers asking, do you know what this means? So checking for comprehension while they were trying to figure out the clues. I heard the groups trying to, at least so that they would give the clues to the other groups. And at one point, another group did overhear, and then they're like, oh, like, you know, felt bad that they were being too loud. I saw teachers struggling, but winning the struggle not to give him.
That's the first time around.
I saw 3 different strategies about how to start the activity. I'm not good at that.
I heard the team that won, a student in that group said, we were in last place for most of the time and we won. And he would said it really quietly to his team, and it wasn't being boastful, it was just like, whoa, we came, we were last and we came ahead.
I heard a lot of just perseverance. I wrote down growth mindset because there was a lot of trying and failing and just trying again or going back to the math, looking again, or so especially that one girl, poor girl, she was working on the same picture or the same clue like the whole time, but she got it. I saw students continue working when the bell rang, appearing as though they did not hear the day happen.
Mm-hmm. That's every day.
I'm good.
I saw when groups were done, they went and sat with other groups, and it was, some of them were able to sit there and smile, and others, it was very hard for them not to want to help.
And maybe it was kind of already said, but I just, even though it was sort of a competition, I mean, even like when that first group got it, there was never any, we got it! And I don't think the other 2 groups even noticed, because they were continuing working, so. I heard clear directions given to manage the groups, that they were to get into their groups but not open the envelope until it was time to go.
Great. Awesome. Anybody have any extras they want to add in?
I saw a lot of groups get part of a clue, but then struggle with some other nuanced part of it.
Let's move then into the I noticed. So based on what you saw and what you heard, what do you think that tells you about the student learning that was happening?
I noticed that a couple at least 2 teams that I was watching right away didn't feel they all needed to work together necessarily, and nobody was offended if somebody wanted to go on a different clue It was just really very respectful. And and even though how you had mentioned before that there was an underlining leader, I don't know if anybody felt like they couldn't move on to something that they wanted, that they felt like.
I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I noticed that, I mean, they really did have to know things about the book, like, in order to be able to solve those clues. Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought yesterday you had maybe mentioned that it's not necessarily based on their knowledge of the book that much, but I guess I thought with the clues today, I'm like, oh, I have no idea what these clues mean, so, and I read the book, but it was a long time ago.
This one changed my mind on Breakout Boxes a little bit. The last few I've done, I think I'm getting better at picking them out, but the first ones I did seemed like they were more about group work and less about the content, and now it's like tying it more closely to the curriculum. So this one tied really closely, and they had to know.
Yeah.
So I felt really, really happy about the way this one went and the way they had to, I loved their discussions today. And then we did one with 11th grade on commas, and they really had to know their stuff, you know, and they had to review some of the comma rules. So I think you can design them that way. When I first did them, I was like, well, this isn't so much about the learning, but it is about the group work.
Yeah.
But I'm changing a little bit on that.
I noticed groups that started together reading questions, but then different students got sucked into sort of the rabbit hole of the question that appealed to them or that they wanted to work on or that they felt was most accessible to them.
Can you?
Yeah,
I had a thought.
I
When I write it down, when it comes back to me.
I noticed some groups would just, every 5 seconds try checking a lock. And there was one particular group that seemed to wait for at least someone else before they attempted it. And I thought that was interesting. It was towards the end, and it was the last lock.
I noticed, oh, sorry, do you want to go back to?
Is it okay?
Yeah,
I
that's
remembered. I noticed kids really like going through, like remembering the story. Like they were talking like through these scenes and they're trying to remember when he saw the red apple or these different things. Like they were really telling this, like retelling the story to each other.
Sorry. Oh, it's okay. We mentioned before that none of the groups were quick to use any of the hint cards, and so at one point, one group decided, they all looked at each other, should we use a hint card? I think it was kind of after you guys reminded them, we have, so many minutes left and none of you have used a hint card. So they all agreed to, and then when Shannon came over, like, you really didn't even say anything to them, it was just, I don't know, like your presence or something. Because then all of a sudden they figured it out, and then, then you gave them their hint card back. But
They demanded it back.
It's true, they did. This was for nothing is what they said.
No, this was for nothing.
I noticed that some of the issues students had were not ones that I would have predicted or anticipated them having in terms of connecting the right clue to the right lock. And reading the text carefully.
As honestly, they didn't attack it the way I would have, or the way I thought, like I would have expected either. Yeah, it was their topics were very unique.
I noticed a student who was typically a class clown really tried to shine, and when he did make an innocent mistake, I think it was natural for everybody to kind of joke with him, but it was real light and just really, I think he still felt like smart, and he wasn't really trying to be funny in this situation, and I thought it was really cool. He was trying to work really hard.
Oh, I noticed that when you did give them hints, they still weren't big hints. I mean, The hint is use the book. Like, that was how you originally said. And then as you got closer, because they were running out of time, then you gave them more specific hints, but still, they definitely weren't hints that gave it away by any means.
I noticed that all three groups used their first hint on the same question.
Which one?
The map, the directional lock.
I wonder if that's because they love that directional lock so much.
I know, yes, so just some of the different group dynamics that existed. It was interesting to see, yeah, like just the personalities that came through in the groups and then how they were able to work with each other because every group did work together, just like came through in different ways.
I'm going to throw one in there if that's okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that different kids took different roles very seriously. There was one boy in one group who kept saying, guys, I think maybe we should all be looking at the book right now. And like, he was not interested in actually looking at the book, but he was happy to like be the reminder for his group. And just like, he knew what the strategy was, and so he was so the diversity of ways for students to shine. He was sort of a taskmaster for his group versus the kid who hunkered down and worked on one clue for 30 minutes straight.
So mine's going off of that. I noticed that this was an activity where you couldn't just sit back and kind of hang low. You really had to be engaged, or it was obvious that you weren't. Yeah, even if we were just delegating or giving ideas.
I noticed there was, like, when they realized they needed to use the book, one group, every kid in that group got a book. But in another group, one person had the book, and then everybody just crowded around that one person, like, did you find it yet? Did you, you know?
I noticed that some groups were more focused on the content and that the content will take us to the answer. Whereas other groups thought it was more about like, let's try it backwards, or like that it was gonna be more tricky problem solving within the clue, and we're less focused on the content.
Like, think of any 5-letter word from the book.
Yes. Try it backwards. Go, go, go. Oh, there's no P. Okay, pick one without a P.
I noticed one kid when they were looking through their books was a little flustered because the kid did not have their own copy of the book, and was just mildly flustered by that for like 20-30 seconds, but then was able to hunker down and kind of like follow the example of the other group members and dive in. Didn't matter.
Let's do one more time around with the I noticed.
I noticed how touched the kids were by the notes or the cards that they read when they finally did read the box, and I know one girl repeatedly said, "Aw, that's so nice." So it made her feel good, and she was one of the girls that was super frustrated throughout the activity.
I noticed just how much fun the kids were having through all of it. Or just through the whole experience, I guess, like how we all heard the one student say, "I've never been so happy in my life." And they just all, they all had, there were times of frustration, but then there was also just as much times of excitement and success. And so it was definitely something they were all engaged in, and it was fun.
It's sort of rephrasing things that were already said, maybe. I noticed that students were frustrated, yes, but were not checked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was, I noticed that no kid wandered off. They were all like doing a purposeful breakout kit related task the entire time.
I'm going to say, since I think we want Shannon in the room to hear the questions, let's take a cookie pause. So it's easy editing. Later for you. So you can have another cookie.
Did she say don't come?
Yeah.
Thanks.
What do you want? What do you want? He needs to get in right away to Noodle Tools.
Oh.
Yeah, because he's got an assignment due tomorrow, but he has Google Drive is blocked on his computer, so he can't access Noodle Tools. So he's like, could you come with me down to? No. Dude, I can't. Anyway, just funny. It's like when these kids have. Anyway, we're getting.
Different disciplinary.
Different kids have access to different things.
Well, they just, right, so then that becomes a really big problem with
Yes,
these computers.
yeah.
Like, I've had, in every class, I've got someone who can't go someplace,
Yep.
and it's really tricky to figure out.
All right, so we're back from our cookie break. We're gonna move into round 3, reflective questions. So things that you wondered, things that you want clarification on, and I feel like we could spend as many minutes as we have left together just asking questions, and I'm gonna give us 5 minutes or so of question asking, just so that we have enough time left to get some answers and still have the round 4 at the end. So, does that sound like an okay plan? Great. Who wants to ask the first reflective question?
I will. So I'm wondering, do you, like, with the Breakout EDU thing, do you actually get like these clues, for example, through them, or did you create these clues?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like, where do you get them? You can create your own, but that takes a lot of work. Like, you know, but you can definitely, you know, that's a way to go. And so I put together the planning guide, and I did share it with you guys. You have it, and there are different options. Like, I'll just go through the options for finding games, and it is more limited now than it was like at the beginning of this school year. So Breakout EDU used to have everything just wide open, and now like every online model, they're starting to go more subscription based because it's a for profit. So what they've done is that, you know, instead of just selling you kits, which they used to do, and I bought my kits through them and it was reasonable, now they sell you a kit with a 1-year subscription, and that opens up all kinds of games. So that's one way you can do it, is you can get, you know, you can go through them and pay for a 1-year subscription, but to me it's too expensive. It doesn't make sense when there's other avenues to find them. So one avenue is that Breakout EDU has free games that are user generated. And so I walked through how to do that down here. So games through Breakout EDU, you go to their site, you sign in, you browse the platform. I did test this out to make sure it would work. And then you can search for all the free games. And you can go by subject, you can go by grade level, and there's a fair amount. And then every time I found one through them, it's really set up nicely. Like, there's a video of how to do it. Like, here's what it looked like in my classroom. Then they have a Google Docs folder that you can just make a copy of, and it's all the clues, and everything's ready to go. And then from there, like, I'll make a copy of all that Google Docs stuff, and then I'll alter some of them based on what I think my kids know, or it's super hard to know. Like, one of you guys said it, the way they were thinking was not the way you would think. And so it's really, the first time you go through it, you're like, oh, I see, they went down this rabbit hole, and I never even thought about that, and that took up the whole time. But there's plenty of free games still on Breakout EDU. So that's one way. The other way is that you can go to Teachers Pay Teachers. And, you know, as you guys know, the quality really varies. Like, there's some that just don't look worth it, but some have been really good. This one came from Teachers Pay Teachers, and this was about commas that we used with 11th grade, and it was great. It fit really well with their level of knowledge on commas, and it was really fun. So that one came from them. And then you can make your own. And I've got a list of all kinds of online tools you can use to create all kinds of cool codes. And I mean, you could, if you're into this kind of thinking, it could be really fun, but it's gonna take a while. Like Notes is really fun, where you can create this hidden message, you have to hold it at a certain angle. And so these are all these sites that are free, and you can use them to make some cool codes. I like it when other people start it for me and I can tweak it. I mean, like, it takes enough time that way.
Yeah.
It sounds like it wouldn't be that labor intensive, but just getting like, okay, how many groups do I have? And then what, if you have 5 or 6 sections, how are you gonna do it? You know, we wanna laminate everything and have them use pens, because then you can erase it and reuse the clues. But how are you gonna, you know, how many boxes do you have? You know, setting the locks, making sure to finish. Are you gonna write down which groups didn't finish and let them finish the next day? It becomes this, like, you know, logistical nightmare. So teachers pay teachers, make your own, go to Breakout EDU. Those are the 3 ways. Oh, and then I should mention digital breakouts. Like you can do it without the kit. So you could do and there's plenty of those here, which could be done either way. Like these are all digital breakouts that are free, but you could turn these into a regular kit. You know, you could use these just like we saw today, where you take all these clues and use them, you know, just with the boxes. So the digital breakouts, you're creating a Google form, and they go to the Google form and enter the locks, and then they break in that way, which isn't as fun, but it's cheap. You know, you don't have to purchase the boxes. So my deal with the kits is that I have some for the high school and some for the middle school, and I don't want those used outside of the high school and the middle school because it's such a mind game with keeping track of the locks and I've ruined locks before and I've thrown away and buy them. So I'm like, I just was gonna, you know, thinking I'd use them between the 2 schools. So if you guys wanted to do it, you would have to set up, you'd have to buy your own kits, but there's actually cheap ways to do it. So I have this one box, not the one box method, but make your own kit, which goes through on Amazon what you would need to purchase and what it turns out to be. So it's basically like you get and maybe you'd have stuff sitting around your house. Like you get not the lock so much, but like the toolbox and then a hasp and then add all the locks. You know, so that might be, and you know, if the whole school is willing to you know, several people want to use it, I would think you could do that in a fairly.
And I'd be happy to help get something like that set up as a, like.
Well, and I'm sorry, because before I did this, I thought they had them available through Keystone.
Right.
And then they just decided to pull them because it's Breakout EDU is going to the subscription model. And they didn't want to have this thing that was not free.
Available.
But I feel like there's enough free out there that this is still totally
So what are they
worth
doing
it.
with their boxes then? Are they gonna auction them off?
Right, that's what I asked. She's like, we're going to use them for, I was like, can I have them? But they're going to use them in-house for different activities, you know, when they have teachers come. So, yeah. So that would be, you know, so you could make your own kits. You could do a 1 box method where kids come up to you and they try the lock. If it doesn't work, they go back to their group. That makes it a little bit cheaper, or you could do it digitally. So I have all that stuff on here, and they're all links that. And then the last thing on here is how to reset the locks, because boy, that's like caused me some problems before. I've had to like just chuck a lock because I can no longer get back into it. So there's all the detailed instructions on how to reset them, and then just make sure you keep track of what you set it to. You know, then or there's some you just have to be careful with keeping track of it. So if you have someone to help you, you know.
But I'm happy to help coordinate if it seems like something for Kaylee that would be a good fit. Cool. So that's where we get clues.
Did you anticipate the issues that they had? Like, were they the things you thought would cause trouble?
Not for me, no. And spelling, that would be. We thought about
We
that.
did have a word bank that we didn't end up using. That was one of our clues, and they actually did that one better than I thought.
And
I
then-
thought they would struggle with that one.
Right.
And so we had a word bank as a clue, but they even struggled with that one. So.
And then we just helped you probably saw we helped groups with spelling.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just not something we can expect those kids to.
Did you agree on the hints beforehand? Like you said, this is the hint for this clue?
It was just that one clue we had.
The word, yeah, the word.
Yeah. And then I think you overheard me giving a clue, and then you gave the same
Yeah,
clue. We were sort of casual about that, you know.
And we did do it with 8th graders earlier
We did.
in the week, so we probably helped them a little more. But we tweaked the clues a little bit after that as well, because we saw what they struggled with too. So.
Yeah, but you could be really organized about exactly what clue, especially if you're we did not emphasize competition because it just doesn't work well with these students, but some kids just love that. You know, and we did Romeo and Juliet one with 9th grade, and every single group, you know, Miss Hogan timed them, and they loved that. So that's another way to do it.
It's like the escape room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought
Yeah.
too.
What works for size of groups? Because these were like 3, 4, looks like it worked really well, but I've seen like my classes when I have a class of 30, if this is something I want to do, like how would.
Well, you could do more locks, you know, so like you could add another, I have 2 word locks, so you could add a second word lock, and I also have a key lock. So then you would have more clues, and you could divide so they could divide them up. So I think with Liz's class, she had 30 kids, and so we had a group of 6. Like, I wouldn't go past that. And then we even forced it, we only gave them 2 clues at a time, so that they couldn't break them up. Here's one, here's one, here's one, and then they had to collaborate, and then when they were done, they turned it in, and we gave them a few more. So I wouldn't go over 6. I mean, ideally 3 or 4, but, you know.
Do you know if the ELP students have done this?
They did it once. Yeah, we did that a couple years ago, and then we haven't revisited it, but that was middle school. And they think like this. They have that kind of a brain. So I'm not sure if I think they had fun with it. They have fun. Every group has had fun, you know. They just think in different ways. I think it's really interesting because her students do as well as any other group would do. Kind of levels the playing field in a way. You know, it's kind of fun because group work, how they work in a group, and then, you know, how you think creatively doesn't necessarily have to do with your intelligence.
The reason I asked is because I was thinking it could be, in a way, a different kind of formal assessment for like an ELP group. It could be more, rather than.
I thought it'd be fun for an ELP group to come up with the clues. I thought that would be really fun. But they'd have to know a little bit about it before they did that. Yeah, but I thought that could be kind of fun for them to do.
It could even be like the ELP's like win time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That would be really cool. I'll pass right now. I can't. I question it. Now I'm thinking yeah.
Did the time it took them, was that about what you had thought it would take?
We were really hoping it would take one class period.
I think it actually maybe took a little longer than I thought.
Yeah.
I thought we'd have some
For today,
reflection
yeah.
time at the end.
Yeah. But it worked out well, and then we sort of pushed it at the end to get those groups done. It's really hard to carry it over to another day.
Yes.
It's like they want the satisfaction being done, and you want it, and then we had something in there for them, and we wanted you guys to see that. So, and I've done it where they come back in, and it's okay, but it's confusing. It's like, again, it's like, okay, I think this is your box, and which clue, you know.
How do, like, what do 11th grade clues look like compared to this one? Like, how do you vary the skill level?
You know, that one didn't, it's not really, that one really relied on their common knowledge, and they still didn't, it wasn't obvious to them how to make it all work. So I would think that if kids start doing these more regularly, then they'll start thinking in terms of how breakouts work, and they'll get better at it. I mean, there is a point where, like, we could do too many of these, you know? It's like, that's like, how do you do it so it's still fun for them, you know? But.
So you had said you were hoping for time to kind of reflect and talk. Is it okay, is it or not, maybe not okay to stop, mid-point and point something out? Because I was thinking of a student who got an answer right that nobody in his group really knew or seemed to, and he repeated it several times, but you could tell it was just like in one ear out the other for the rest of the group, and I just wondered, is that an okay spot to say, or for the small group to bring them together and say, hey, listen, and then have the kid explain how they got there. I don't know. Everybody's sort of in their own momentum of doing their own thing, but yet I thought, oh, this is important for this kid to know that the group knows he got this.
There were so many moments like that today that I really wish we each had, like, there was someone writing down notes for each group. Like, you could almost set it up where, like, one kid is the observer. And you'd have to make sure that they got a chance to participate, but, like, just writing down observations, like, Matthew said, or whatever, said the answer 5 times and no one noticed, or, just little, that would be really interesting to do some reflection then later. Because I think in the moment, all that stuff just kind of goes flying past.
And what a time to shine, to be a reason that one of the locks opens. I mean, that's pretty cool.
But there are some reflection questions that were at the end of that Google slide, and that Google slide just came from another user that made the game, and I just copied it and took out a few slides I didn't want and changed the rules from 3 to 5. 5 to 3. But that was so easy then. It was all done for me. But where was I going with that? Oh, there's reflection questions on the last slide. So that you can easily figure out some of your own too for how that would work.
I know we're over the 5-minute mark on questions, but we're also getting the answers as we're asking them, so I feel totally fine with, we've got another 3-ish minutes that we can spend on this round if we want to.
I was gonna ask if you ever tell them which clue goes with which block, but I noticed by
Yeah,
this,
that one did.
that this one does.
And that helped. The first time we did that one, I was like, this is gonna fly by, and it took the entire time for them to do it. So, but they'd never done a breakout before too. So, yeah, and that one was nice that it told them because it took that, I don't know, just sped it up a little bit in a good way. So it kind of depends on what you want your focus to be. Do you really want to trick them and get them working as a group, or do you want to focus on the content?
With the content, do you think it's important that all of the kids know how each clue was solved? Or not?
That's a good question. It's a little hard to do with this. I think it would slow it down
Unless
and
it was
make
in a
it
follow-up, like
Yeah.
where you then talk about it the next day,
Right.
but I don't know if that's worth it or not, or you lose their attention.
I know, so I gave
So
her a
I was just
copy of all the
curious.
clues so she could kind of come back to it. It would certainly, yeah.
I think I plan to tomorrow. I want them to be able to talk about it.
I think it might
It's
jog their
important.
memory, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that was the one where
Yeah.
I thought it was this and it wasn't, and
But you did ask me though, when you sat down and all of a sudden, like to give them a hint and all of a sudden it's like, oh, lost open, and you were like, well, wait, go back, explain your thinking. I noticed that.
I forgot all about
Yeah.
that.
And I realized I had written that down.
I think one of the reasons this one worked so well today is that the culture of the classroom is so strong. Like you've created this culture where they're so good working with each other, they don't put each other down, they know the expectations in your class, there's a routine at the beginning, and they really respect each other and they respect you, and they've learned to celebrate each other's different, it's just like that. It worked well because that's all been established, that's all work you did before, so I feel like I kind of got to swoop in and benefit from that, but that was really well in place to make this work.
The joy of collaboration.
Yeah.
So
It's cool to see. It's just cool to see that classroom environment.
Do you think so I often do team building stuff at the beginning of the year as a way to build that in my classroom. So do you think this wouldn't work well there because that isn't already established?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I think it could work either way. I really do. I don't know, what do you think?
I think in a typical classroom, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't
Right.
with my population, but I think in a classroom like yours, it would be just fine. But I also have, most of these kids I've had for 3 years,
Right.
so it's
Yeah.
had a lot of time to get to know one another very, very well.
Right, but it could also mean that this could go south.
Right.
Like they know each other really
Too
well,
well.
they know you really well, they
You're
get
not
sick
good at
of
this
this
kind
kid
of
that
thing,
does
I'm gonna go
this.
do it.
Yeah, so it still works really well.
I was really amazed that nobody shot anybody down. I was absolutely amazed. I was thinking of when I took applying real colors and we had to work in teams, so there was an orange, a blue, a gold, and a green in every group. And people totally took over, and those are adults. And it was, I know it wasn't just an activity, but it was like, whoa. Like we're never gonna get this done because you're not gonna let us. I mean, you know what I mean?
Was I in your group?
No, you weren't. But it was clear who was gonna move pieces and who was gonna do the, you know what I mean?
And this was different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I kept thinking, gosh, this is amazing because, I do know some of the kids and I do know their different colors, but yet there was none of that. None of it. And so I think that goes with your climate and just the morale of the kids working together too. It's
That
amazing.
group that solved it first, that they didn't cheer.
Yeah,
I've never seen that
I didn't know they
before.
solved it.
I didn't either until I went over.
She came over quietly and
She showed me the note, and I was like, "You're in?" I was shocked. I didn't even know.
I don't believe it either.
And that group also didn't react at all when one of the clues got opened, like when one of the locks got opened.
Yeah, even when she finally got the directional one, she wasn't like, yes.
Right,
I mean, nothing.
she just
It was
opened it
like,
and then moved on to look at what the
Like
boys
the
were
other
working on. Yeah.
kid. This is the best day of my life.
Yeah, I was
excited.
That was cute.
I think you were cheering.
I was crying. It wasn't just a tear.
All right, I'm gonna move us to round 4. Next steps. So, after being in this lesson, what are things that you are leaving thinking about for yourself? Is there a goal with the breakout box? Is there a goal from the climate and culture, from the group work, from tying a non-traditional celebratory final activity? Like lots of things that we talked about. So just take a minute and write yourself down, this is something that I could. All right. You're certainly not required to share your personal self-challenge with the group, but if you want to, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One on a more personal level. I have an absolute fear of locks. It's actually story from basic training.
What's the vocab word for that?
I don't know what kind of phobia that is. But honestly, it made me a little nervous at first to be in there with those. So that is something that I would definitely have to work with another coach, teacher on, because that part scares me. I do literature circle novels in my room, and I would love to try, I would really love to do this in place, maybe a day of talking about roles. Instead, let's find clues and let's check for comprehension that way, and let's check for your understanding on how the story is going that way. I think it would just be, break up the monotonous of literature circle roles can sometimes get a bit that way, and so I am actually really excited to try it. And we just started new novels in my classroom, so yeah, that'd be fun. But
well, and it doesn't have to be a breakout kit either. It could be clues that are a scavenger hunt, working through the building, or like it's that idea of game-based learning, which can be a good tool to have.
I'm gonna piggyback off of yours. Sarah Nowak and I co-teach as well, and we're finishing our novel units, and we kind of have talked, and I know she emailed you about possibly doing something like this for the end of our unit, and more of a comprehension based or even a genre study. Because we had lots of different groups reading lots of different novels, but they were all historical fiction. So can we somehow bring that together? So we're just in the starting of planning stages, but I know you were included in that as well.
Yep.
So yeah, kind of the same line of thinking there.
First of all, I would love to purchase all the materials to have one at Carrie Lee for sure. But yeah, I was thinking, because I want the whole class to be able to be involved in it instead of like just one group, or I don't know, so Like right now, we are reading the book Wonder, and I thought, oh, I wonder if there's something we could
I bet there's
do
one
with
out
that
there.
at the
Absolutely.
end, or, so, yeah, I'm excited, it seems really fun.
So a couple of things I was thinking about. One is, so the first day of class, students always have to solve clues to find their seat. So there's no seating arrangement. Well, there's a seating arrangement, but I don't give it to them. So they have to find clues in the room and different things to do.
Do they talk to each other when they do that?
They do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's part of what, then when we debrief it, it's about, what if you didn't talk to anybody else? Like, would you have been able to find it? Well, no, because they noticed something I didn't notice, and building into how that's important. And in my role, like, would this have been as fun if, I mean, I could have just told you where you were sitting. I could have told you, go to this desk. How would that have changed the experience? Well, it's the same in the study of math. I could tell you exactly how to do that, but that changes your engagement. And but as now some of my colleagues do the same thing, where then I have to come up with new clues. Like, it's hard to come up with clues I can use, like, to sit at desks in my room. So I'm like, oh, this might be a new, because then I could just have it inside of the box, could be part of the clue to add a layer, which I think could be nice. But nobody else take that idea, because if the boxes are in use the first day, then I can't.
So you've got tips for next year.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is nice is that, in a way, it's a way to have a self-checking activity. So we do what we call circuits, where you get the answer to one and you find it in another box, and that leads you to your next question. And so by the end, you know, if you've done all of the questions and made it through the whole circuit, then you probably got all the right answers. And if you don't find that answer, or you get in a loop that something's wrong, to go find that. And so to add excitement to some of those circuits, would there be a way to build this in as sort of the way to self-check as they are working through things? And for AP Calc, I have to do lots of reviews, so I think it would be a great way to be able to, even if you're just solving AP problems and then taking your answer to get a lock, it's just a little more.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of where I could fit this in with the content that, like, the variety of classes that I teach. And then just the one that I really noticed that you did, it can I be judgmental? But it was that was so good that you guys both did really well. Was just that comfort with letting them struggle for a while.
That was really hard.
It was hard for me.
Important.
That's
really
hard. Yeah, it's really hard, and yet that's what we want to see them doing.
Right, and I've been trying to find that balance for years, and will continue to, where it's like, how much do I let them flounder before stepping in, and then if they do need help, how much is too much help, what do they need to get there? And I think that was something that was really done well today, and that's something else I did.
I walked away.
Trying to figure out more.
I walked away.
We had to talk about it beforehand. We're like, okay, we're not going to give hands unless they hand us the card. We had to do a little.
And at the end, it was a time thing too.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
but I did walk away a few times, and I bit my tongue a couple times too.
That's not even the letter lock.
I know.
Dude, that was to be a letter.
And I just kept wait time, and that was for me, not for them.
I think my personal one is, I loved how they celebrated each other's success in this, and I want to find more ways, whether it's with a breakout box or something else, to have my students celebrate each other instead of celebrating themselves, because I think we want kids to feel good about themselves, but I want my kids to feel good about their peers and notice each other find success. So.
That has come a long way this year, and I totally put that on the compliments project. I've seen all of my classes, because of that, it's come full circle, and they're doing it in other classes, they're doing it in the hallway. I mean, I've seen a huge difference, and I don't think that would have happened last year.
Right.
And I completely put that on that
I
project.
will email that blog post out to everybody in case you didn't get it before.
And I don't know, that bulletin board in my room, if you saw that, that's been so powerful for all of them this year. And I can tell you, you wouldn't have seen that last year.
Cool.
You would have seen more of the
Competitive.
competition and the I won, I got it. And that has completely changed.
I did notice a little bit of this is a different topic really, because I felt like that culture was already set up of them complimenting each other, and that I have seen it too before where they don't really do that, you know, so like she already had that established, but I noticed a few kids saying, I can't get this. Gosh, I just can't get this. And like there are like 3 people around just like staring. Just like one of those things you just want to write down these little things so you can discuss it afterwards. It's just.
But we do that as adults.
We all do.
You're right.
I've caught myself, you know, with even Mrs. Leaps, you know, I try always to say we, because that's the culture I want, is we are a team. And we are, but I'll catch myself once in a while and oh, no, Mrs. Leaps and I, you know, I always try to come back to that, because we do that too.
Well, 2 days in a row, giving up after school time. Thank you. Appreciate it. This was really, thank you for opening your classrooms. Thank you for planning for subs. If there's anything that you want help from, I can help with it, or another instructional coach can help. Shannon and Tara can both help. So a lot of resources available, and we'd love to help. Happy afternoon, everybody. Take a quickie for the road.
This is the UV pen and the UV light too. We didn't use those this time, but you circle something, you know, some clues, and then you just tell them ahead of time, like there's one clue that you'll need this for. And you can, some of them have decoys, and you know, there's all kinds of ways you can do it, but this is fun. Like I think Uriah had mentioned using that before, something you remember to.
I'm surprised they didn't say, where's that flashlight? They talked about that yesterday. They all remembered that.
It's just gimmicky, but it's fun, you know.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everybody.